Hi, everyone.
Greetings. We're in Genesis chapter 46 now. Joseph has revealed himself to his brothers. His brothers have gone back to tell their dad, and dad at first seems to be disbelieving, but then he's convinced.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says at the end of 45, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die.
Mm.
So we just want to read the first four verses because there's a whole bunch of stuff to unpack in those first four verses of what Jacob does before he goes is instructive, and there's probably things in here we would miss if we weren't thinking about the past already or what already has happened to Jacob's family.
So Israel took his journey with all that he had, and came to Beersheba, and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Then God spoke to Israel in the visions of the night, and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. So he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there, and I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will put his hand on your eyes.
First of all, the local notices. He's come to Beersheba, and we're all familiar with that phrase, from Dan to Beersheba. It's like the limits of the promised land. So he's about to leave the promised land to go into Egypt. And he pauses. And this also is instructive, because think of what his grandfather had done
Yeah,
100 or so years before.
he had gone down, but he hadn't inquired of God or sacrificed before going.
Yeah. So we can note some progress in Jacob here in that he's doing something that might indicate he's learned a lesson, at least from his ancestors' misfortunes, because something bad happened to Abram and to Sarah while they were there.
So it makes me think that he might even have been thinking of just going to see Joseph and go back.
Yeah.
There seems to be an indication that God has to tell him, go down, and I'm going to make a nation of you there.
Yeah.
So he may have just thought he was just going to go to say goodbye and then go back.
So he may have been doubting or at least fearful
that he's disobeying God.
And this is and Jacob's. We know he's a deal maker.
Yeah.
So he's assuring himself and God at the same time that no, he's still a worshiper of his ancestral God. But I think it's instructive that the title that's there, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. There's a certain distance that's come in now. Even the name Elohim here is indicative of a distance that's appeared that doesn't have to be there, but we see it very frequently with Jacob, don't we?
It seems less personal. He doesn't say my God, he says the God of my father.
Yeah.
And then when God talks, he also says the God of your father.
Yes, that's true, but it also says, he says to him, Jacob, he calls him by that name. That's his original name.
Yeah.
But the account says he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night. So that distinction of the names of Jacob, not just of God himself, but here you don't see the covenant name at all. You see the God of your father, the God of his father Isaac, Elohim. And this is also very important, and we would probably miss it when we were with JWs. What has happened to the Tetragrammaton? Well, in all these chapters, it's disappeared. It only comes back in on Jacob's deathbed when he's talking about the future in the land.
It kind of brought back to my mind Genesis 12, when God says to him, I will make you a great nation there. The great nation, that was one of the promises Abraham was given. 7 promises, and one was...
The first one was great nation.
That he would be a great nation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's missing, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, of course, is that the name is attached to the land promise. It says after he hears those promises that Abram, when he's still Abraham builds an altar and sacrifices to Yahweh who had appeared to him. Notice the word Yahweh there, and in the other appearances to his father Isaac as well, and to the appearance to Jacob himself. God is not going to appear, and you don't know that here.
Yeah.
God is no longer going to appear to the patriarchs, not even to Joseph. And the reappearances will only begin in the book of Exodus with the burning bush, etc. Right?
You wanted to read that, didn't you? The
So
Exodus account?
let's leap over hundreds of years here to get to the end of this part of the story, where they're not going down into Egypt, but they're coming out. So when God calls Moses, first of all, notice what it says. It doesn't say God called Moses. It says in Exodus chapter 6, well, you're going to read the whole thing. So
Yeah, I'm going to read it actually from the Silver Sword. So you're going to have the divine name in here.
This is the New World Translation for those who don't know, the Watchtower's official Bible.
Right. Exodus 6, you wanted 1 to 8?
Yeah.
Was it? Okay. So Jehovah said to Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. A mighty hand will force him to send them away, and a mighty hand will force him to drive them out of his land." Then God said to Moses, "I am Jehovah, and I used to appear to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty, but with regard to my name Jehovah, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as foreigners. Now I myself have heard the groaning of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I remember my covenant. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am Jehovah, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and rescue you from their slavery. And I will reclaim you with an outstretched arm, and with great judgments, and I will take you in as my people, and I will be your God, and you will certainly know that I am Jehovah your God, who is bringing you out from under the burdens of Egypt. And I will bring you into the land that I swore with an oath to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I will give it to you as something to possess. I am Jehovah.
Well, notice at both ends of the promises here, you have the name stated clearly. He's not saying I am the God of your father anymore. He's saying, well, he is saying that, but he's saying that means I will now call myself by a name that by which your grandparents didn't really know me. Not that they didn't know the syllables of the name.
Yeah, because we already noted that it was in there.
They know the name, but they don't know the character of this God until he fulfills his promises that have to do with the covenant that he's made. The covenant has to do with land promises and a nation that is separated from all other peoples, so that it may be in turn a blessing to all those other peoples. And that can't happen until he brings them out of Egypt. So the name becomes prominent again.
They're a great nation at this point, a multitude of people.
Yeah.
And he takes them out, and now he's giving them what he swore on oath, it says.
Yeah.
To give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those guys are all gone now.
Notice
but
says...
it is saying that he's giving it to them. So it's their people.
They're unconditional promises. Notice that all of the verbs here are unilateral. I will.
Yes.
There's no ifs.
Yeah.
So all of these, and you can count them, and I counted at least 7 here, of I wills. These are promises that are based on a unilateral covenant, the Abrahamic Covenant, but they involve a people who will become his peculiar possession.
Yeah.
And that can't happen until they're brought out of Egypt. So why did he suppress the name, as it were, for all these centuries? Because the covenant appearances that were the basis of that covenant, the covenant expressions to each of the patriarchs and to Moses here, were all conditional upon a certain understanding of the people. Right now they're just crying out for deliverance.
Yeah.
But from every indication, they're happy to be in Egypt, other than the fact they're being oppressed. And of course we know when they get into the wilderness, they want to go back to Egypt. So they've got Egypt in their hearts. They cannot. That can't be changed until they leave the country and become people living in the land of promise. So I think that what we probably would miss in Genesis is that the name has disappeared now in chapter 46, and it stays disappeared except for deathbed promises of Jacob, who is now Israel, and he's living up to his name. We have a couple of links. Oh, no, let's got a couple of quotes first.
Yeah.
John Calvin first, right?
Okay. John Calvin says, because the holy man is compelled to leave the land of Canaan and to go elsewhere, he offers on his departure a sacrifice to the Lord for the purpose of testifying that the covenant with God had made with his fathers was confirmed and ratified to himself. For though he was accustomed to exercise himself in the external worship of God, there was yet a special reason for this sacrifice, and doubtless he had then peculiar need of support, lest his faith should fail, for he was about to be deprived of the inheritance promised to him, and of the sight of that land which was the type and pledge of the heavenly country. Might it not come into his mind that he had hitherto been deluded with a vain hope? Therefore, by renewing the memory of the divine covenant, he applies a suitable remedy against falling from the faith. For this reason he offers a sacrifice on the very boundaries of that land.
So I can agree with Calvin here. You might miss that point, that it's as if God is lifting him up again, because he might be doubting, or at least debating with himself about, what is this a good thing to do?
And will the promises ever happen?
Yeah.
Because he's taking it literally.
Yeah. I guess I would disagree with Calvin. Is that possible?
Sure.
So in the church we are allowed to disagree with even the famous commentators. And here are Calvin, because of his, what we would now call Calvinism, his particular eschatology, he believes that the land was a kind of a type of a heavenly country here, using the analogy, I guess, from Hebrews 11, where it says that they were all looking forward to this heavenly city. But of course there's no indication of that in the text, that it's not, in Jacob's mind anyway, a literal promise.
So sometimes I think what happens is that people no longer are looking at the text from the point of view of the person themselves, although he does give you the indication that Israel here is thinking, well, what about the promise? He believed the land was significant and he had to be in that land. And I think that the application of a heavenly country, even in Revelation, Jerusalem comes down. So there is a literalness, even in the type, I would think.
It comes down from heaven, yeah. It's not like there's an either or in God's mind. It's a joining of heaven and earth.
Yeah. But we have to be careful when we're reading Scripture to always give first consideration to what they thought.
Yeah.
Rather than what we think or what we're living in.
Yeah, that's a good safety measure. Then there's Campbell Morgan makes a good point here too. He says the first note of that promise was that he would make him a great nation. There, that is, in Egypt. How much lay concealed in that word, Jacob, in all probability, did not understand. To him the promise would be interpreted as meaning great in numbers. That is, great nation would be great in numbers, right? Well, yeah. And that it had such intention, there can be no doubt. But history shows that it meant far more. For through discipline and suffering, the nation was to be made great in other ways than numerically. God only reveals to men at any given time so much as they are able to bear. So just as the Lord, in Hebrews again, the Lord was made perfect through suffering, so his people are made perfect through suffering. Israel's suffering and the church's suffering And that's something for us all to bear in mind nowadays when we can no longer take our Christian freedoms for granted. What's our link?
Is Jehovah's Witnesses God the God of Moses, or more like the Egyptian and pagan deities?
Now that's a meditation on that famous passage in the Passover account in Exodus where it says that God not only judged Egypt and Pharaoh, but he judged the gods of Egypt, the gods of the Egyptians. And I think there's a bit of commentary in there on Exodus 3, the revelation of the divine name.
Yeah, in the description. So, yeah.
See you next time.
Bye.